Let's talk about the book. Where,
Sure.
and I know you created, but what's like? Can you just introduce the book from your viewpoint? Because I have different questions here.
Sure.
I'm just like, actually, I'll go through it. Going about the book, about what lessons, insights have you put into this book? Okay,
Sure.
blockchain, okay, and AI is misunderstood. How does your book tackle some of this? And that's the part I saw in it. You basically focused, yes, there's fear, but this is the solution kind of thing, yeah? And then about your background on launching and helping launch like Ethereum and Tether and all this, okay, is you've seen more than one cycle and you survived it. And that's the part, like literally, I've literally gone through it, and these kind of things is case studies, okay, what feedback, who do you think this book is for? And then the part is this book is for information part of it, and any advice should be taken on their own choice opposed to anything else.
Right.
Okay, we've been in this for long enough.
Well, living through the cycles is different than just reading about them in the history books, right? If you remember very vividly when there was just fear, and then all of a sudden it became unfounded.
It is, and that's the part. Is like I remember the first time I met you, and that was in the W Hotel in Vegas when you did your. I think it was your second conference. You did your first one in LA.
No, my first Coin Agenda conference, the first several ones were all in Vegas.
Okay.
The first one was at the Palms.
Yeah.
That was iconic. That was something where we were in the depths of the first crash, right?
Yes.
Now, well, not first, because that would be cycle one, but it was right after the first halving so the first halving was 2012 and it went up to 2016. So from 2012, the halving was in November of 2012, $12.70. It went up to $1,200, right? And it was a double bubble. It went from $12 up to like $250, and then it crashed down to $50, and then it went limping back up, and then it crashed again in the summer to $66. And then everybody's, oh, it's over with, it's done, it's go back to $10. And instead it went to $1,200, right? And there are reasons for that. But the main reason is what I've come to describe as really 2015 is when I came up with the name, the 4 Seasons of Bitcoin. And because I realized that within each cycle, there are 4 reliably predictable phases. First one is Bitcoin spring. Okay. That's when the seed of the new cycle is planted. And that's the most predictable because you can estimate years in advance when 210,000 blocks are going to come. So we know that the next halving is going to be in early 2028. It could be anywhere between February and April, depending on how fast the blocks move. But let's say it's March or something like that. We know in advance it's going to happen. And yet that doesn't stop people from still feeling that there's no hope when it's crypto winter, when it's Bitcoin winter. Like it's never going to come back. Yet every single time you have a new halving, you have a diminished supply, it takes a couple of months to basically get over the fact that miners are losing money. And then comes Bitcoin summer, and it creates all new highs again. And that has happened now every cycle, right? So the first cycle did not have a halving. So it's a little different than the other ones, but it was actually even more extreme. So the first quoted price of Bitcoin was when Martti Malkki, who was a college student from Finland who discovered the white paper and emailed Satoshi. And he said, hey, I like what you're doing. I'd love to be able to help. Can I help you with a website? I know how to build websites. So he built Bitcoin.org. He also helped them put up Bitcoin Talk, which was Satoshi and Martti Malkki.
Yes.
And Satoshi said, what I really want you to help me with is to mine. I want to make sure there's at least 2 people mining at all times. And literally, he wrote him just like right after the white paper. And so even though Hal Finney was mining too, Markey was mining like day and night, and it led to him mining 55,000 Bitcoin. Here's the thing though, he sold 5,000 of them for $5. It was the first sale of Bitcoin. And then he sold the rest of his Bitcoin, 50,000 Bitcoin, to buy an apartment in Helsinki.
Oh, ouch.
Hey, it went all the way from tenths of a penny to $1, or $2 or whatever he bought his apartment at. This is great. Obviously, the rule of thumb is if you believe in Bitcoin, don't sell all your Bitcoin. And even if it's just, obviously he'd be an extremely rich man now if he had 50,000 Bitcoin. That's the story of a lot of the people in the book. At any rate, from the first sale of Bitcoin, the tenth of a penny, it then went up to $30. So it's 3,000x. And then it crashed down to $1, 97% loss. So that was your first extreme cycle. but because it didn't have a halving, it was a pre-cycle. It was the first of 33 cycle. To me, it was like almost cycle 0, right? So the first halving then led into the second cycle. That was in November, late November of 2012, $12.70. And you could have bought, I give this example in my book, you could have bought 1,000 Bitcoin for $12,700. Today it's worth $100 million. However, if you follow the advice in my book to not just hold, but sell near the top of Bitcoin summer and then buy back after capitulation, you'd have about $6.5 billion. And so that's the lesson that has been cemented in my mind. Every cycle it gets stronger in terms of the proof that the cycles work. So again, Bitcoin spring happens the day of the halving. It's when the seed of the cycle is planted. It's the shortest season.
Okay.
It's only been 4 to 7 months, the longest ever spring. And it's funny because when you hit spring, you had such a long winter, you think, we're never going to see the high price again, right? And it always happens, and it happens in a short period of time. So we hit the cycle, and in this case, the high wasn't that far away. So the actual halving was at 63,900. The all-time high had been the month before, which was 73,850. Now, that was the first time that you had an all-time high after the all-time high of Bitcoin summer, when you then capitulate at the end of Bitcoin fall, and then you have a long winter. That was an anomaly because of the ETFs. Many people thought that meant the end of cycles because, oh, you just had an all-time high before the halving. Or they said, this means it's going to be a very short bull market because you had the all-time high before the halving. And I listened to some of that and something didn't smell right. And then finally I woke up one morning and saying, wait, you can't have the all-time high of this cycle last cycle. That was the new all-time high of last cycle. And so that's what I predicted correctly in my book. That number, 73,850, is the new bar to meet for Bitcoin summer, not the parabolic top of 2021, which is around 68,000, right? And so Bitcoin summer has been remarkable in that it happens the day that you hit the all-time high of the last cycle. Every single time, 4 out of 4, when that happens, you go parabolic. And that's why I call it Bitcoin summer. It's when things grow, right? And so your pre-cycle, or your pre-halving cycle, when you went up to $30 and then went down to $1 and your halving was at $12, now, yeah, you made it eventually at $1,200, but it was flat, relatively flat, until you got up to $30 again. As soon as you get to $30, within a few weeks, it was $250. And then it crashed. You had a double bubble. And then it ended up raging at the end of the year to 1,240 something. And so again, you didn't have to, if you're following my sell at the top, buy back at the bottom, most people wouldn't be able to pick the exact high, right? But you had chances to sell at $1,000 before, and you had chances to sell after. So I'm saying that if you sold your $12.70 investment around $1,000, you still did pretty well.
Yeah, of course.
And then what you would do is hold on to the cash. So what I suggest is hold Bitcoin 3 years, hold cash 1 year. And so you hold a Bitcoin until you get at or near the all-time high. And there's signs that the bubble's there. Fear and greed's in the 90s. The whales are starting to sell. And so you're never going to hit the all-time high, although I know a couple of people who did for 2017. It was the day that the options started trading on CM8. And they thought that was going to be the sell news day, and it turned out to be. But with here, you could have basically, instead of holding your $12,700 investment, which is worth $96 million today, you could have sold it for $1,000. Now your $12,000 investment is $1 million in a year, right? But then what you do is you don't just say, yippee, I made a lot of money. You hold on to that cash, maybe you get some interest, but you want to make it liquid, and you wait for capitulation.
Okay.
Capitulation ended up being, it's usually about a year. This first halving, it was 14 months. And so it kept going down, and people were buying all the way down, thinking it was just like a retracement that would go higher, and it didn't. And so you have to realize that so far, Bitcoin fall has been at least a year. So Bitcoin summer ends the day the bubble pops. It's hard to tell until a few weeks later if it actually did pop.
Yeah,
and usually you end up having a couple of months to make up for the mistake. So in other words, when it hit this last time, right, when it actually hit 64,000 in May and then dropped back down into the 30s and then hit 67,000 and change in October, but you had months to be able to get out above, say, 60, right? And so if you ended up buying it at 12, selling at 1,000, which is not 1,200, but close enough, you had a while to get out of there, and then you held on to your cash for a year. The bottom was 171. You had several months you could have gotten out around 250. So you sold at 1,000, you bought at 250, you now have 4,000 Bitcoin.
Exactly.
And then you hold on to that for 3 years, and the high of that cycle was 19,800. But if you didn't pick it to that day, you could have gotten out around 15, 16,000 before. You could have gotten around 15, 16,000 for about 90 days after. So if you got out at 16,000, guess what? You know 16,000 Bitcoin because you go and buy back at 4,000. And again, the bottom there was 3,200, but there were several months you could have bought back at 4,000. And then that went up to 60. It actually went up to 73,000 as the all-time high for the cycle. But let's say you only sold it at around 60. You sold it at 60, and you then bought back at the day after FTX was 15,400. So let's say you didn't hit that. You had several months you could have gotten between 16 and 18,000. If you got it 16,000, which was the price on January 1st, congratulations, you now have 64,000 Bitcoin. So 64,000 Bitcoins, about $6.4 billion.
It's crazy, isn't it, when you look at that? But also, it's not a long time. We're talking about a small,
I'm sure certainly we've absolutely had diminishing returns and diminishing losses, but the diminishing returns have been logarithmic and the diminishing losses have been arithmetic. So you had 3,000x, 97%, x, 85%, 30x, 83%, 8x, and then 75%. This time by that cycle, I project with neutral macro, we would be at 3x the halving. That would put us at 193,000. We clearly have positive macro with Trump, right?
Indeed.
So how much that puts above? Historically, positive macro, negative macro, basically takes you 20 to 25% up or down. So in other words, if Kamala won and said, I'm appointing Elizabeth Warren as the czar of crypto, you still would have the halving effect. You'd still probably go up, maybe not 3x, maybe 2.5x, but it wouldn't go flat. There's too many other forces. But with Trump coming in and saying, and basically decimating the anti-crypto army, and now saying things like, we're going to have a strategic Bitcoin reserve. We're going to possibly have zero capital gains for Bitcoin if you sell it, have zero capital gains for projects that move back to America, all the different things he's been talking about. If half of those come true, we could definitely have enough positive macro that instead of 3x, it's 4x. But anything above that, I'd say would be a result of the supercycle because of adoption. Because it took us 15 years to get to about 5% of the population. I can't imagine the next 15 years, we're going to be less than 80%, not 10%.
I agree with you there. And I've seen it from a global perspective, okay? I've seen it from Asia, and I've seen it also in Africa.
Nigeria, they're already in the, 30, 40% adoption?
Yes, it is. And this, when people think about crypto, people don't realize, okay? Like, it's been adopted quite predominantly in America, in Japan, for instance, but in the UK. So if you look at it from a currency, and I always tell people, if you want to know where crypto will flourish, look at currencies that aren't freely traded. Nigeria is one of them, but also
Argentina,
Turkey, Indonesia, Philippines, okay? And that is the opportunities.
Yes.
And you go there and you look about how people are using it because they want stability. They want stability.
In chapter 20, I call it the African Spring, and I compare it to the Middle Eastern, to the Arab Spring. And except here, it was economic. And I found that for the most part, the global South is really rebelling against hyperinflation. And they're doing it by basically buying Bitcoin, turning it to stablecoin when they need to buy things. And you've traveled the world. How many places outside of the United States do people just buy things with Tether on Tron?
Exactly.
Right? It's become like the new American Express traveler's checks.
It is. And the part is, it's becoming the norm. Like, we both been in it, especially yourself. We remember when it was a big thing to do it. Yeah. Now it's become normal.
Correct.
And that is.
Well, look, just like the internet, it gets adoption when the ease of use gets easier. And with all technologies, you remember what the early internet was like. I remember having a conversation with a gentleman high up in the ranks at NBC Network, and he said NBC will never be on the internet.
That little mutt sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC. There it is. Violence at NBC, GE.com. I mean,
Well, Allison should know.
What
do you
is
say to that,
internet
Allison?
anyway?
Never. It's too hard to use. My mom is not going to put a second phone line in her home and get woken up in the middle of the night with it going bing, bing, and then what does she get? She gets something that's slow and doesn't do video.
Yeah.
And obviously the GUI changed and the speed and processing powers changed. Now it's, okay, Mom, here, I'm going to toss you an iPad. You can watch any movie in the world on Netflix and in broadband, and the internet is invisible to you. And at some point, probably within the next 20 years, blockchain and crypto and Bitcoin will be invisible.
I always tell people, history never repeats itself, it mirrors itself. Okay? And the exact same...
Whereas Mark Twain said, it rhymes.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That one I totally agree. And we've literally saw it with the internet. The internet did that. Okay. Now I can see it with crypto. Okay. And then the next one is I can see it with AI.
Right.
Because AI is going to be such a huge one in this whole...
Well, and the thing is that these technologies layer on top of each other and make them even more powerful. Your first wave was just the computing revolution. Personal computers. There was a lot of skepticism in that day. As Bill Gates said there should be a desktop on every desk in America. You got laughed at. Is, well, you can have a home computer? What do? Your wife got to put recipes on it? And of course, now everybody has more than one computer.
Of course.
Right? And they take their work home. They go and play games on it. They do all sorts of things, right? Because you didn't understand what you could put on a home computer until a whole bunch of people went out and developed things. And when the iPhone came out and the Apple Store only had a couple of dozen apps, you're like, why do I want to go and have an app store? Now you have 1 billion apps on the app store, right? And so it's just like all these things just layer on top of each other. And so with cryptocurrency, you had the Web 1, which was basically allowed anybody to see anything, to read anywhere in the world. Social media Web 2 allowed you to read, write. You were able to talk to anybody in the world and get real-time feedback. That caused the mass adoption to billions of people. Facebook, WhatsApp, these things are now you just taken for granted. Twitter. And then the Web 3 was the ability to own an asset digitally. And that was a radical concept because the great thing about Web 1 was the creation and really expansion of digital files. I remember the digital camera being such a big deal because all of a sudden you didn't have to buy all these rolls of film. You didn't have to treat each thing as, oh, I wasted the shot. Big deal. Waste 100 shots, waste 1,000 shots. Just delete it. Its storage is relatively free. And that was a game changer. And so we're now approaching an age where storage capacity on computers is free, internet bandwidth is free, relatively speaking, and ultimately processing power is going to be free. And so that is where you then get to Web 4, really is AI. Web 3 did the ownership because digital files were powerful because I could take a picture of you, put it on Facebook, and 1 billion people can see it, and then download it as their own. That's awesome for files. Gives them mass functionality. Not good for an asset. If I give you $1 and you can just counterfeit that dollar and give it all over the place, no one's going to accept it. So what Satoshi did with taking a lot of existing technologies, and in chapter, I think it's 3 on the cypherpunks, I explained the whole history of cryptography and how there was this goal to basically have it empower people to create private money that could be tracked and they could be used by the people without governments. Nobody was able to pull it off until Satoshi. David Chaum came really close 30 years prior to Satoshi, 30-something years prior to Satoshi. Ninth, he had all the elements except for the mining. Instead, he basically went to IBM to verify. And once he had a centralized component, IBM can shut it down. And so that was the final. I've said for years that Bitcoin basically, which created the blockchain, they took 5 or 6 existing technologies and put them together in a novel way that created a new world.
What you just said there is something I totally agree with. I said we're going to a place now where the physical, digital, and AI is merging into one. And from a personal point of view and a business point of view, you need to embrace it from all sides.
My next book is going to be talking about how crypto and AI are going to just dramatically change the world economy and also personal economies, growth opportunities, and society. And I've had the name for several years, and I finally have a vision of how the book's going to work. I decided to write the Bitcoin Supercycle first, and then the next book is going to be called Pandora's Blocks.
I like that. That's a nice one. I look forward to reading that one. It's because the part was, I remember, and as we were preparing for this, in 2023, you actually predicted the growth of AI, okay?
Yes.
Before anybody else, okay? In a big way. Did you actually see it going as crazy as it did? Or do you think that?
I also talked about the centralized AI and how fast that was going to grow. And yes, I did. When I saw the ChatGPT reached 1 million users exponentially faster than, I think the prior record for reaching 1 million users was Netflix, and it reached them in 10 months. And ChatGPT did it in 5 days. And they reached 1 billion users in a little over a year. That's just insane. And no, AI, I remember in the early days of the internet where something shocking and fundamentally disruptive would happen every couple of months. Audio on the internet, video on the internet. And it happens every couple of days in AI.
True, exactly.
And in crypto, it happens pretty fast too, but AI is even faster. And when you put the two of them together, that's really obviously what you're doing. CETI is remarkable. And what Morpheus has done to basically have something that just started getting funded in February and now is at the scale of operations that it is in like less than a year. I mean, it just, when you combine the speed of crypto with the speed of AI, that's really when you start taking off. There's a token that just launched yesterday that was started by two principals in an AI fund. One of them was a programmer. And Mark Andreessen had said in a tweet, I would love to have an AI program that reads through scientific research programs, analyzes them, and says, are they true or false? Are they hallucinating? Are they full of shit? And so Matt, the programmer, said, I can build that. So he built it. And then he basically said, I probably, if I want to build this on more, I have to fund it. So he attached a token to it and put it on pump.fund yesterday. He hit $60 million today.
That's great. And that is so exciting, isn't it? It's,
Yeah.
Because I know you're a big supporter of decentralization and everything. And this kind of entrepreneurship is perfect going to the new year, especially with the new administration. There's no obstacles. It's only if you have an idea, you have something that can benefit, it can be funded like that.
I was going to say, the United States has been the capital of innovation in the internet, and look how fast it grew. And the last couple of administrations, particularly Biden, just wanted to stomp it out. And Trump now being a born-again Bitcoin leader, because he wasn't that much during the first administration, he was still learning. All of a sudden, he wants all the projects to come back to the US. Look at the biggest brains in the industry here, are the guys who really created massive innovation that had to move out of the country.
It is.
If you look at Uniswap, founded in New York City, had to leave the country. Chainlink, founded in San Francisco, had to leave the country. They're operating on a Cayman, on and on. All these, Ripple, founded in San Francisco, all these top projects. I mean, yes, there's some that are non-US, but if you look at the top 20, Cardano, it's out of Denver. It's just, there's so many of these just remarkable innovations in crypto that all happened with Americans. And they were all forced to, like, Charles went to Hong Kong. But it's just, if Trump says, like he's promising to do, come on back to the United States, just imagine all the jobs that are going to be created. And also the innovation, if you're not spending 2/3 of your budget on lobbyists and lawyers to make sure that you're not crushed. And AI is the same issue. So I think it was interesting that David Sachs got appointed the crypto AI czar.
It is. And what do you think? What do you see the Trump administration from blockchain, crypto, AI? How do you envision it? Because you've been quite close to all this and most of the people as well.
Yeah, and I went to meet with Trump in Nashville, and I'll be going to the inauguration. And yeah, no, I'm encouraged. I think that he saw what happened in his first term, and he realized that if he's got this little magical moment in time where he's got a mandate from the people, which the people can be fickle, right? The mandate can change. But he's got 4 years now, at least certainly 2 before the midterms, but 4 as president, where if he's got Congress and the judiciary and the Senate and the states, he can do a lot of stuff. And of course, bringing in Elon Musk now as a wrecking ball was Vivek, who's basically just as a consultant to the government and the world's richest man, saying, this is all pork, we're going to change that. It's going to be really remarkable to see big governments disrupted and hopefully right-sized.
No, I'm totally with you on this. And I was talking with a mutual friend of ours, and I said, the other part is, do you know when you have no fear, what you'd be able to achieve? Trump has that now because Trump can't be re-elected under US rules because he's already
That's
done
apparently a gray area.
Yeah.
He may argue that it's consecutive terms. So at any rate, we'll see. But no, I think he has no fear because, look, he got shot at, he survived. He's fearless at this point. I'm just amazed that he's got the gumption to go and he's meeting with Trudeau, who he disagrees with on tariff issues, and basically just says, hey, if you don't do it, I'll just make you the 51st state. And then he tweets something along the lines of, it was great meeting with Governor Trudeau of the great state of Canada. What prior president would do that? That would be considered an act of hostility that would start a war.
It is, but the thing is, and since then, okay, the finance minister has resigned in Canada, and then also people are saying that Trudeau's actually might be on the way out. And so let's see. But the thing is, the passion Trump has for the industry on all sides, it's exciting.
Yes, absolutely.
And you've literally launched the book at the right time.
I did. I actually intentionally had it ship in November for that reason.
It is. And the thing is, okay, we're going into the cycle now. We're in the summer cycle.
We're in the summer cycle, which typically lasts 9 to 11 months.
Mm-hmm.
The cycles tend to get a little longer on spring. They've been a little longer on summer, so it might be a year this time. So I can see it going November to November. We've had a double bubble 2 out of the 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that we're going to probably hit a pretty nice peak around maybe May or so. Mm-hmm. And then it'll be June, July, probably no later than that. And then dip in the summer. And then they'll flush out some people and then come roaring back in the fall. Now, there's no guarantee that it doesn't just peak in May. And I think a lot of it's how high it goes. Plan B said he thought we were going to go to 1.2 million in February and then drop to 200,000 like a month later. I think that's a little extreme, but I do believe that whatever price we get to, it'll drop 2/3.
Okay.
Not 85%, but not 20%. Okay. And that'll be your capitulation. That's if it hits 300,000 and it goes down into the 90s. Everybody's like, oh, Bitcoin's dead, it's going to zero. And that's the best time to buy.
It is. It's like my background's in wealth management. And when I was advising people, I said, use the fear for your benefits.
Yep.
And the part was, I was saying, if you're fearful, just buy what you spend on Starbucks every day.
Yep.
Into dollar cost averaging. It's like time in the market is much more important than time in the market, especially with your kind of use cases.
Yep.
You've already given guidelines, okay?
Yep.
As it's not advice, it's guidelines. It's
correct.
People need to make their own decisions, but you've given outlines of, okay, between this time and this time, there's an opportunity.
Yep.
People should take, in my opinion, take it and use it for their own benefits, because if you've told people this is the guidelines, this is the opportunity, then it's only them.
I'm just saying what I'm doing and that I think there's some data behind it, and you can believe me or not. And I'm not a registered financial advisor. I say it right at the start of the book, but so far I've been pretty good at projecting a few things.
Exactly. And that's the part. You've got, your past actually says it all. Yeah, you've literally got it all in the book. And for people that don't know about it, you've got history, which is interesting. Yeah, you've done all the funding of some of the main projects, the founders, but also the situation.
Helped launch Ethereum and Tether and
Do you know, the part was I was talking and I said, okay, that's where I met you. And when you were doing the Ethereum launch, that's where we started getting into crypto.
Yep.
And we grasped it. And we literally took it from your events and we literally started it in Japan and everything like that. And it grew from there. And and that's the part where I said to you that I have a huge respect and I'd love to talk, and literally like-minded people always align together. And the thing is, you look over the years, people come and go, but the circle keeps on getting bigger of the same people, which is exciting. And that's the part I go, okay, the event Tokenized is something where people don't realize what they get until they get here. And I'll share a link on here on your new ones, because I know you've already got your next year ones already lined up.
Yes, we're going to be doing March 24th to 26th. For the Tokenized San Juan, which will be part of Puerto Rico Blockchain Week.
Nice.
We had started in March in 2017 when the price of Bitcoin was about $900 and the price of Ethereum was about $30. And obviously by the end of the year, they were much higher. And we did 4 years in a row where it was in the spring, and then the pandemic hit. We literally had in 2020, the last conference that was held anywhere in North America. A week later, everything shut down. We held it the last week of February. And then we couldn't do anything in 2021 in spring. So we moved it to the end of the year. I wanted to not miss any years. And so we decided to tack on to Art Basel in Miami, which is also coming back from the pandemic. And that was a celebration, and NFTs were big that year.
Yes, I remember.
And so I thought I'll go and promote this so that you can go to Miami, go to your NFT events, and then go and hop on a 2-hour flight to Puerto Rico. And that was a huge success. 2021, I think, was one of our best years ever. I think we had about 700 people or so. We sold over $1 million in sponsorships. But it's a very boutique event. We've never been over. The highest we ever got is, I think we got close to 1,000 people in 2018. And I couldn't even meet everybody, because it's like the idea is to have it more like a cross between a Goldman Sachs conference and a TED Talks, where you want to be able to, over a course of 3 days, meet everyone you want to meet. And then the more intimate ones, you basically meet everybody 2 or 3 times and you start doing business together. And so many people tell me their favorite tokenizers are the smaller ones. They're like 150 people, like we just had in San Juan. As we get into the bull market, we're probably going to have some bigger ones. We're going to have our global event in Las Vegas again, but we're not going to hold it alongside Money 2020, which seems to be steering more into AI and away from crypto. But we're going to hold it right after the Bitcoin 2025 event that David Bailey puts on. So they are right after Memorial Day. May 27th to 29th will be May 29th to 31st, and there's a Ripple conference at the same time.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I just was told about that conference, and I agree with you. Some of the best conferences are the small ones. Yeah, and especially from our side, from CETI side, all the founders met in your conference. And the thing is, okay, one of them is Dennis. He lives in Japan. He literally lives down the street. But we weren't friends until we had to fly all the way to Monaco. Okay. When you did it in Monaco, same thing as our other business partners is there. And the network is crucial. That's the part. And the people that keep on coming are usually the same. 80% of them are usually the same. The other 20% are new people, but also new businesses or projects. And that's my experience. Okay?
Right. This is more like 50% are the lifers. And then obviously the bigger events, you say, wow, there's like people I don't know here, because it's a bull market. And then the lifers go during the bear market, right? They'll keep the conferences going during the bear market.
Exactly.
And that's where sometimes the best opportunities are. And now that we're going into we've only been in Bitcoin Summer now a little over a month. And so I think that we're going to probably have another 9 to 11 months left. So we're going to basically go through, I don't think that we're going to have the final peak before October. And I don't think it'll be after November. All prior ones have been with I researched this and validated. I knew about where it was, but when I actually researched the days, it's only 37 days at the all-time highs of a period within. It was December 4th of the year after the first halving, December 17th, the year after the second halving, November 10th, the year after the third halving. It's only 37 days.
Okay, that's interesting, because I also remember, like always during the end of the year conference, the Las Vegas conference, there's usually a big event, the price at that time. Right? And I always remember you talking about it.
Coinage and the bump.
Exactly. And I remember, and
we had a tokenized bump this time.
Exactly. And the part is, I think the whole thing is the tokenization of the whole world is going. And I like how you've evolved your events from coin to tokenized, because we are, in my opinion, I think it's the same as you, we're going to be tokenizing everything from the whole world.
And I wanted to not just have it be the industry is involved, right? In the beginning, it was all ICOs. And when I first got it was about mining, right? The altcoins in the first, couple of years was Litecoin, Feathercoin. Purecoin was the first one to do proof of stake. But everything else was about finding a way of mining that could let the little guy still mine. Because when difficulty got too big, all of a sudden it's like you need too much money to mine. But you could mine Dogecoin, you could mine Litecoin, you could mine, because they had script mining that had the algorithm basically didn't let it advance too high, and yet it could still keep the network secure. Whereas Bitcoin it's now, it took a year and a half to get from level 1 difficulty to level 2. And I explain in the book how difficulty works. It's basically you have to answer a mathematical equation that is tossed out every 10 minutes roughly to seal the block. And you do it by answering, it's called a nonce, a number used only once. And you end up having, basically, you have to have the processing power to answer this question. And in the early days, it would be something the equivalent of what's the square root of 9. And now it's what's the square root of 71,427,000. And so obviously you need a much higher computing level to do that. And it took a year and a half to get from level 1 to level 2 of difficulty. And then the next month it was 3, and the next month it was 5, and the next month it's 8. We just passed 100 trillion times harder to mine one Bitcoin, and the reward is 1/16 as much.
That says it all, doesn't it?
1.6 quadrillion times harder to mine a Bitcoin.
That's crazy, but it also is very exciting because as the market keeps on maturing, Bitcoin is the leader. I think the altcoins is going to be the next one to go, especially during the summertime, as you...
I've said for years that when Bitcoin gets a cold, the altcoins get pneumonia.
Yeah.
And the opposite is true, right? When the Bitcoin pumps, the altskins sometimes go parabolic. And typically in most cycles, Bitcoin will hit its crazy peak first. And then there's several reasons for this, but as a whale is selling off some of his Bitcoin gains, he's not putting it into like real estate. He's basically going and saying, oh, I think I'm going to go and buy some Ethereum with us, and that'll pump, or Solana. So it's usually your Bitcoin pumps first at the end, at the tail end of the bubble, and gets the numbers that they didn't think was going to happen. And then after that, you have your kind of like top L1s and top 50 coins go to crazy highs, and then they settle down a little bit. And your last thing is everything, right? It's the crazy coins, the small caps that go parabolic. I remember in 2018, the day of what turned out to be the all-time high for the market, not for Bitcoin. Bitcoin was December 17th of 17. The all-time high for the overall market cap was January 7th, 2018. I remember that also because that was the day I was hacked for $24 million. But I remember heading out because it was during CES. And I had an event that day, and I'm checking my phone in the morning, and I saw everything was up 20% or more. I should have probably just turned around, canceled my calls, said I'll be late to this thing, and just pressed the sell button on just about everything. Because when you have everything up 20%, that for sure is a sign of the top.
Exactly. And I know it's interesting what you just said. So from your point of view, as we're going into summer, what sectors of the industry are you seeing an opportunity in, or do you like personally?
Sure. Every cycle has a new narrative. The first cycle before the first halving, leading up to 2012, was all about Bitcoin. It was 95% Bitcoin. And there was a little bit of a dribble of, again, the narrative that I talked about, get the better mining out. So the number 2 coin was Litecoin. If you look at sort of the top coins, the top 10 coins, this stuff is not even around anymore. Dev and the Litecoin, Feathercoin, not around anymore, barely. And because they were all about different ways of mining. And that then led to the second cycle, which is ICOs. So that was 2012 to 2016. You had it led by the parabolic move up Bitcoin in 2013, and then the creation of Ethereum in 2014. And really it was the Ethereum cycle. It was the next cycle of that was the ICOs, right? You ended up going, so that was 2012 to 2016. Now 2016 to 2020 was the ICOs, right? Because basically, cycle 1 was basically the coins that were about mining. Cycle 2 was basically Ethereum and the ability to have proof of stake coins. And Ethereum, of course, was initially mining. But the cycle was basically looking for, they actually called it at that point, Bitcoin 2.0. What is the next Bitcoin? So it was really about like finding the next Bitcoin. It turned out to be Ethereum. And you really didn't start kicking off the craziness of the ICOs until right at the end of that cycle, when you had the DAO and it raised 150 billion, and you had Waves that raised 70 billion. And so in 2017, so this would be the 2016 to 2020 cycle. Actually, you know what? Both of those were after the halving. So yeah, the ICO started with Waves and the DAO, and then they just went nutty. By the end of the cycle, it was just magic money. And you had Ethereum grew up in value as well, to the point where Bitcoin dominance got to its lowest point ever. It was 35%. And there were people talking about the flippening when Bitcoin would be lower than Ethereum, and that never happened. But the ICOs was just this democratization of fundraising, right? And then the government stepped in and said, no, where's your form this? Where's your form that? We don't want you to like just throw money at a project, even though it was pure entrepreneurialism, right? And yes, there were some frauds, but there's some frauds in Silicon Valley. There was frauds with Bernie Madoff. And the government came in, pretty much shut down the ICO market, and that helped cause the depths of the crash. But I posit in the book that it's a predictable when all these things happen, because government goes after people when people lose money. They're making money, they don't care. As soon as they start losing money, then they step in. And they predictably lose money in the third year of the cycle, because that's when the bubble pops.
Exactly.
And then all the way down, people are screaming, and the government's, I got to take the headlines now. And so again, that happened at the very end of the bear market before the halving, or right around the halving of 2016, is when the SEC gave their first guidance on the Dow. And so we're not going to arrest anybody. We're not going to fine anybody. We're going to let this be a learning moment, but this is a security. And then the next bear market, 2019, that's when they came in and started just rifling through things. And then obviously this last entire administration has been about that, particularly after FTX.
Oh God, yeah. That one changed the whole narrative, didn't it? And
yeah, look, the narrative on the positive side for the last cycle, 2020 to 24, you forget that DeFi didn't really exist until 2020. They call it the summer of DeFi. It wasn't that long ago, 4 years ago. And now look at the size of the market.
It is. And that's what we're looking at from our perspective is AI. It's like
that's this cycle now. So it started at the end of last cycle, but it's going to grow. So if you figure that like first cycle was about alternative mining, second cycle was about creation of new Bitcoin alternatives like Ethereum and Ripple and a few others. Monero was big then, privacy. And then the third cycle was all about the ICO and about the democratization of being able to fund your own capital, which continues today with meme coins. I think you're going to have a second wave of Arthur Hayes and a post where he said, make ICOs great again, because he thinks that centralized exchanges are just like extracting all the value, and that it's really a pure form of democracy to basically have people they're allowed to go to Vegas. Why are they not allowed to bet on coins? And you read the white paper, and as long as you're not purely defrauding someone, you shouldn't have nanny state go and say, oh, you shouldn't have invested in this because you're not a sophisticated investor or something like that. They're trying to ease off on that a little bit and say, maybe you can take a test. And if you're willingly saying, I understand the risks.
Yeah.
No, you don't. You're not rich enough to understand the risks. But you're rich enough to understand the risks to go into a casino if you're over the age of 21, have a few drinks and put your entire life savings on black on the roulette table. So it makes no sense. It's really just, it's not protecting the consumers, it's protecting the investor class.
It is, and that's where we are. And I think it's going to be an interesting time, and I think so much is a focus on Trump and everything else. And I'd like to just touch a little bit on the AI side of things, because that's where our part is.
I was going to say that is one of the narratives for this cycle. It's the last cycle, the fourth cycle was DeFi, NFTs, and Metaverse. And Metaverse pretty much totally collapsed. So did NFTs. They may come back under different skins, so to speak. But DeFi has not collapsed at all. And DeFi is stronger than ever. I think this wave, number one, I think is decentralized AI. I think that is because AI itself is so powerful, and the fact that decentralization of AI, and again, there's really 2 or 3 things that are going to happen this wave. One, of course, is decentralized compute, which is where you operate. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you have heavy demand in the Bay Area, but you have excess capacity in Southeast Asia, why don't you put those two together, right? And that's what you're able to do with decentralized compute.
Exactly.
And then the other one, of course, is decentralized kind of inference, and being able to go and do training models like Sapien does, to be able to do decentralized LLMs like Venice is doing, decentralized agent marketplaces like Morpheus is doing. BitTensor grew from 12 cents to 700 and something dollars. So there's explosive. And then what's been happening with AI meme coins, AI 16Z is now almost $1 billion market cap. You've got, it's been breathtaking to see how fast AI and crypto have like bonded and created new business models together.
It is. And how do you see the future? I think the part is, is as we end up this conversation, I don't think it'll be the end. I think it'll be the end of this chapter, and we can revisit in about 3-6 months. But where do you see?
I think everyone will be surprised by the size of the bull market. We should end up with if you figure that altcoins are going to be about 50% of the crypto market cap at the top of the bolts, that's about where they are, maybe a little higher. You'll be looking that if Bitcoin gets to 300,000, that's $6 trillion. That means that the overall market cap of everything would be $12 trillion. 12 trillion is a lot of money, right? The gold itself is a 16, $17 trillion market. I was talking about when will Bitcoin pass gold? Well, crypto markets overall are going to come within shooting distance probably by the end of this cycle. And we'll probably pass it next cycle, and then gold will pass, and then Bitcoin alone will pass it the cycle after that when it gets to about $700,000.
It is, and that's the part. I think you just nailed that figure. 12 trillion. People think that the crypto market is a huge market. The crypto market's tiny compared to the big companies. Yeah, if you look at the size of Bitcoin compared to Tesla's market capital,
It's getting close now.
Yeah, it's
Getting close. $2 trillion for Bitcoin alone.
Exactly.
It just passed. I think it's bigger than all but I think 5 or 6 of the companies.
Yeah, and that's the part. Is you're looking at a whole industry, and people say it's a bubble, like a negative. But then they don't. Then you look at companies that are the same size, but the economic power of what Bitcoin and crypto.
Well, and if you look at the early stage of those companies, Amazon was wildly erratic. People look at Bitcoin and say too much volatility. Congratulations, the volatility is going down, but so are the opportunities. Volatility is how you get rich.
Yes.
Right. As Warren Buffett said, and I quote him in this book a couple times, but this one I love is he said the biggest risk in investing is not knowing what the hell you're doing. And volatility is fine if you know what the cycles are, and that's really the essence of the book.
I know, it's great. And how do people get your book, Michael?
The easiest way to get it is to go on Amazon, Google Bitcoin Supercycle book or Bitcoin Supercycle my name. I think some days it comes up just with Bitcoin Supercycle, number 1, but it certainly comes up in the top 10. But just to find it, just Bitcoin Supercycle, Amazon, Bitcoin Supercycle book, and then just click and buy it, and it's what ships to you.
Perfect. And
It's in some retailers too, but bookstores are going down that way.
Let's keep through. Amazon works, and I can tell you that it works in Japan, UK, Germany, and America, because I've had friends from there buy it and they've been shipped to it. So I can personally vouch for that, and it's great.
I'm working on an AI companion to it too, where you'll be able to have it be read to you in like multiple languages and then answer the questions.
You're going to create like an avatar of yourself or something? Or
Already have one.
That's cool. That's what you just said there is exactly what we just spoke about. It's the merging of this, the traditional, the digital and AI. You're literally merging them together, and this is the future. It's an interesting legacy that you have. Yeah.
Thank you.
And the new book that you're going to write, I look forward to doing that, and we're supporting it from our side as much as we can. You know that we'll always have that. But I'll ask one question. What do you think the market Bitcoin price, everybody asks you the thing, what do you think the Bitcoin price and Ethereum price will be around this season?
So at the end of Bitcoin summer, I would say that Bitcoin should go somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000. It could go higher if Trump does everything he's talking about. I don't think we'll get 1 million. I don't think we'll even get 500,000. I'd say the highest it could get is I could see it doing 450.
Okay.
And which would be, I don't think it's going to, but I think that's about the highest we can go. I think the lowest is going to go if he does almost nothing he's promised. It does a complete 180. It's still going to get up around 150. Okay. We already got to 108 and we're early in the season. But basically, where I think it's going to fall is probably somewhere between 250 and 280. That would be my best guess. Nice. And then people will be buying like crazy because they think it's going to 500,000, and then it starts dropping. And if it follows like the diminishing returns and diminishing losses, it should probably drop about 2/3. So if it's at 270, it would then drop down to about 90. Okay.
Interesting. Then that's interesting. I look forward to seeing that. And I'll put all your social media on the post as well, so people want to follow you. They can follow you, and look forward to hearing about it.
Okay.
Yeah. Michael, good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this.
All right.
Thank you very much.